This is the fresh perspective. What you're about to hear is not an explanation, it's a reflection. There's no rush, just listen, and let it meet you where you are. In the last video, our conversation reached a turning point. We saw that escape doesn't come from fighting walls, but from rising above them. Now, it was time to test something deeper. Not with theory, not with belief, but with understanding. Let me ask you a simple question. How do you remove an egg from inside a bottle without breaking the egg? My cousin stared at me. He turned the problem over in his mind. He frowned. He murmured to himself. I could almost hear the gears turning. I laughed gently, not to mock him, but to encourage him to keep thinking. Finally, he gave up. Please, he said, just tell me. I smiled. The answer, I said, is imagination. And in that moment, I could see it in his eyes. That pause, that quiet hesitation. Not because he was confused, but because his mind was stepping outside what it normally accepts as possible. I leaned forward. Notice something important, I said. In this three-dimensional world, removing the egg without breaking it feels impossible. But placing the egg inside the bottle in the first place, that was actually very easy, once you approached it from another level. What looks impossible from one dimension becomes simple from a higher one. Each level is a limited reflection of the one above it. I asked him another question. How do you think the egg got inside the bottle in the first place? He paused. I've been wondering that, he said. And I nodded, because in that moment, something important had already happened. Without realizing it, he was using imagination. The egg was there, not physically, but clearly and vividly in his awareness. And that is where reality always begins. Before anything appears in the world, it appears in understanding. I said to him, we think the universe is solid, hard, fixed, unchangeable. But what we call solid is really life slowed down. He blinked. This world feels rigid, I continued, because it has hardened over time. Like molten metal that cools, like cement that sets. I paused. But the source of that solid form is not solid at all. It is fluid. I let that sink in. Life takes the shape of its container. And the container, I looked at him, is thought. Let me explain it another way. Each level of reality only shows part of the picture. What you see at one level is always a reduced version of something richer above it. That's why lower levels feel restrictive. They're not wrong, they're just incomplete. I paused. A shadow is not false, I said softly, but it's a poor reflection of the object casting it. That is how life is made to be. Think about water. Pour it into a cup, and it becomes the shape of the cup. Pour it into a bottle, and it becomes the shape of the bottle. The water doesn't argue, it doesn't resist, it simply responds. Life works the same way. Matter is not the beginning, I said. It is the result. My cousin was listening intently now. Matter is where reality finally comes to rest. It's the last stop, the final crystallization of something that began much earlier. I leaned back. By the time life becomes matter, it has already taken shape. What we touch, see, and struggle against is the final stage of a process. I paused. That's why changing life only at the surface feels so difficult, so exhausting. He nodded slowly. You're trying to reshape cement after it has already hardened. You're working at the final layer instead of the source. I looked him in the eyes. To change the shape of life, you don't fight matter. You raise consciousness. Thought doesn't belong to the three dimensions, I said. You cannot weigh it. You cannot measure it. You cannot locate it in space. You cannot point to where it lives. I paused. Yet it moves everything. My cousin was silent. Thought arrives from a higher level and flows downward into experience. That's why imagination can bypass limitations that effort cannot. I smiled. It doesn't fight the bottle. I told my cousin, you can live beyond the third dimension without leaving this world. He looked at me surprised. Not through fantasy, I said, Not through denial, but through understanding where influence actually comes from. I paused. When you change the level of thinking, you change the shape life takes. This is not magic. It is alignment. I let that settle. Life responds to the level you live from. As I spoke, I kept watching him. I wondered, am I saying this clearly enough? Will he see it, or will it slip past like so many truths do? I slowed my voice. I reminded myself, be patient, this matters. And then I noticed something. He was no longer trying to solve the problem. He was listening differently. Not with effort, but with understanding. I hoped he was beginning to see from a higher point of view. The egg doesn't need to be broken, I said softly. The bottle doesn't need to be forced. The limitation dissolves when approached from a higher dimension. I paused, and the same is true of life. Most problems are not meant to be attacked. They are meant to be outgrown. That was the real lesson. Problems don't disappear because we push harder. They dissolve when we rise above the level that created them. Each dimension carries its own limits, but each higher one quietly frees the lower. What feels like a prison is often just a viewpoint. Change the viewpoint, and the prison opens. We sat quietly for a moment. Then I stood up. I need to show you one last thing, I said. Something that proves nothing can truly imprison you. He looked at me, curious, unsure, and that was when I walked to the door. If this reflection spoke to you, share it with someone who might need it. And if you want to continue this journey, subscribe. The next part moves from understanding into something very practical. I've also created a song as a quiet reminder of this message. You'll find it in the pinned comment. Sometimes music reaches places that words cannot. Take your time. Let this settle. We'll go further next. This is The Fresh Perspective. Thank you for listening.